Hi, everyone. We are live and recording. Thank you for waiting on us and our technical difficulty. I'm Kellyanne. I'm a bookseller with Mysterious Galaxy, and I have the pleasure of introducing to you our authors for tonight. Tonight we have Sarah Adlakha joining us for her debut novel in August. Her debut is She Wouldn't Change a Thing, and a story about a wife and a mother who is given the chance to start over when she wakes up in her 17-year-old body. We also are joined tonight by Hank Phillippi Ryan, who is the winner of the Agatha Awards and the best-selling author of Her Perfect Life and The First to Lie. If you haven't joined us before, just a couple house rules before I turn it over to our authors. On the right-hand side, you'll find our chat section. Feel free to comment in there as the event goes on and talk to our authors and each other. Below our video, you'll see a green button that says Buy Books with signed book plates. That it'll take you to Mysterious Galaxy directly to Sarah's book where you visit, and you'll get a signed book plate from her. And last but not least, there's the Ask a Question button at the very bottom. If you click that, you can ask whatever questions you want, and our authors will answer them at the second half of the event. So with that, I'm going to turn off my screen, and I will see you guys at the end of the event. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you, Kellyanne. And thank you. Kellyanne is so generous about saying our technical difficulties. My computer, which has worked they're my technical difficulties. I will take the mantle of the technical difficulties. So Sarah, I'm so pleased to see you. And thank you for putting up with my computer glitches. This is not the best for us to
Please, that is not a problem at all. Thank you so much for being here with me, Hank. I feel so honored to have you here. So
my goodness,
I just appreciate you being here.
I'm in Boston. Where are you?
Well, I'm from Mississippi, but I happen to be in Houston right now, just traveling. I'm in a hotel, so I'm just doing some traveling with my daughter right now. But
wonderful, the most glamorous accommodations. Well, you're a good sport. You're a good sport to be talking about your book from on the road, almost like a book tour.
Yeah, right. I just wanted to make it a little more authentic.
Exactly. I mean, this is a debut novel, this gorgeous She Wouldn't Change a Thing. And I wish I could show you all readers. I wish I could flip it upside down, but you know, this iPad won't let me do it. But what an amazing, yes, please do. You demonstrate this way, and then, what did you think when you saw this cover, Sarah?
Oh, I was beautiful. I loved it. Katie Klimowitz was the one who designed it, and I fell in love with it the moment I saw it. And they were doing a couple of tweaks on it, and I said, well, whatever you need to do, whatever colors, I don't know, it's so beautiful. I don't think you could do anything to ruin it. So it just fits so perfectly.
It does. It's so evocative of your book because it's almost the world turned upside down, a mirror image. I know you're a pro at this already, but just set up this book a little bit for us. Tell us what the story is.
Sure. So the story is about a 39-year-old woman, Maria, who is a mother to two little girls. She's a wife. She's a practicing psychiatrist. She's 9 months pregnant with her third child. And she sees a patient in her clinic who says that she has come back from the future and she has some warnings for her. And of course, she thinks that she's psychotic. Her patient is psychotic. And so she's, writing a prescription for an antipsychotic. And but some of the things the patient says, kind of ring true. So she's a little flustered by it, but just under a lot of stress with her life and everything. So a couple days later, a couple nights, she wakes up in the same situation that her patient was in. She's back in time. She's 17 years old. She wakes up in her childhood home. She thinks she's dreaming until she can't get back home. And she realizes that, the same thing has happened to her that happened to her patient. So not only is she trying to figure out how to get back home and how, to figure out what's going on, but she has to convince everyone that she isn't psychotic and that, she's actually a psychiatrist and she's come back from the future. And in the midst of all this, she realizes that she has been sent back for a specific purpose. And if she fulfills this purpose, she might change her fate. She might not be able to return home. So it's kind of a moral dilemma.
I wish we were doing this in person so we could see the audience, because I know that the audience would just be sitting in their seats with their jaws jaw-dropping because the story that you tell and the story that you relate is so unique and so unusual and so gorgeously written. I mean, one of the things I really loved about this book, and I'm going to hold it up one more time. One of the things I really loved about this book is that when I started reading it, I had no idea what it was. I didn't read anything about it. And so I thought as I was reading it that I was reading one kind of a book, and I thought, oh wow, this is really good. You know, this is we love when we see a good book, when we read a good book, and then you just gradually, seamlessly, gorgeously turn the tables a little bit into a completely different kind of book. What was it like to take the reader on that journey?
Yeah, so it was, it's funny because it's when we first started, when my agent and I first started kind of looking to publish the book, it was, what genre are we in here? And so that was one of the issues that became an issue, was that what genre is it? And it does cross multiple genres. And so that was, one of the things that I kind of wanted it to be, not only, it's obviously speculative fiction, but I wanted it to be realistic. So that when you're reading it, you feel like this could really happen to you, right? This could, I could, even though I know I can't come back in time, I wanted the reader to feel like, okay, I feel like I'm in her everyday struggles and the things that she's going through. And there's kind of a mystery involved at the beginning. And then it goes into the speculative part So my goal was to get into that part without it feeling like too hoaxy of like, kind of the Freaky Friday, like wake up back in time and it's fun, right?
And you did that so beautifully, because I'm just turning the pages thinking, wow, this is a really good domestic suspense. Maria is relatable. She's smart. She has adorable but difficult children and a husband that's contentious, and a family that is so every day, just anybody could have this family and anybody could feel what Maria feels. And then she's a psychiatrist, and she's having a tough day at work, and she's doing what she thinks is best. And so we love her. We instantly love her. And because she's taking this journey and she's doing this discovery, we're willing to go with her on that journey.
Yeah, that makes me happy to hear that it is relatable, and that was the key thing for me, was making it relatable, and that was something that my editor worked with me with at the beginning, was it's the hectic life of just any working mom, right? I mean, really to make it that relatable to any. I mean, it doesn't have to be a working mom. I mean, just being a mom is difficult, right? And so. But on top of that, a working mom who's trying to get out the door and trying to get her kids and the things that she thinks are difficult and important, and that how those things become, very valuable things in her life, and things that she misses when she loses them. Things that we complain about every single day.
Let's go back to the losing them, because the thing that the linchpin that makes this work is the moment that Maria meets the other person who says she's from the future. And Maria is a psychiatrist, and she's a doctor. She's a clinical thinker. She's a scientist. And so, of course, she's going to greet this with the clinical, medical, researchy, logical, let's say, the logical answer. And that's what she tells the patient. And that is such a tender, heartbreaking moment when Maria, and we're not giving anything away, realizes what she might have done.
Yes. Like later on, you mean when she's thinking about back on
she deals with the patient. Exactly. When she's doing what she thinks is right in the world that she
in the world that she lives in. Right. And that was that was something that I took with me. I am a psychiatrist also, so I'm not practicing right now, but that was one of the things that I took with me as from my years of practicing, was that kind of scientific, analytic mind of that you have to have, when you're working in that field. And kind of the ideas of every once in a while when I would think, well, what if that, what if that was true? What if somebody's telling me something and it's true? But you can't really think like that when you're practicing. I mean, you have to do what you think is best for the patient. But at the same time, it's, if you ever found yourself in that situation, or sometimes when you have time to think back on it and reflect on things, people that you've seen or stories that you've heard, that you think, what if,
Well, I think that makes the book even more powerful, because as a scientist, one of the things that scientists know and doctors know is that there's so much that we don't know. And the idea that you allow your mind to bloom and blossom and think about possibilities, the writer side of your brain, that's what gives this book such depth and such texture. Was there something that happened to you that made the domino fall in this book?
It started with, like I said, I remember seeing a particular patient that came in at one point who was describing, he had some psychosis. And so he was telling me a story that something he felt like he was going through. And so I remember thinking, as I'm writing the prescription, just like Maria did in the book, just kind of a fleeting thought of, gosh, what if it was true? How would you convince somebody that something like that had really happened? I mean, it didn't linger, obviously, because I had to get to work, but it was, it was definitely one of those kind of things that planted the seed in my mind for me was what if? And so over time I would start thinking about that. What if that really happened? And how would you convince someone?
And how would you convince someone? Exactly.
Yes, and that was the big question.
And I love that sort of stayed planted in your mind, that little seed of an idea of, and that means that we have to, in your book, we have to embrace the idea of time travel.
Right.
And time travel and second chances and do-over, and what if you were actually someone else? I mean, the idea of do-overs and second chances is the most tantalizing topic that there could possibly be. I bet you all have thought about that. But Sarah, what you mind so beautifully in giving Maria this option, whether to accept this do-over life, this second life, this other life, additional life, is that she begins to realize that every decision she makes not only affects her, but someone else's life, the ripple effect, the domino effect. Talk a little bit about that and juggling that in this book.
Right. So that was difficult. There's in any book or any author who writes about time travel, you have to have your own specific set of rules, right? And the rules change according to the author. And so that was something that when I first started writing, I didn't write down a set of rules. And what I realized as I got into it, it becomes so layered and multifaceted that you need that set of rules in front of you. So I started actually writing down the set of rules and how you can impact somebody's life. And so, I'm sure anybody can think about, the things that they've done. You can think of anything that you do, like the butterfly effect, right? How if I do this and I make this move here, it affects this person and then this and then this and on down the line. So in addition to that, I also had to stay within my own rules. And so that becomes a little bit tricky. What can you change and what can't you change? And it all depends on, what the author will allow in their own time travel rules. So that was, I wanted Maria to have that. I wanted her to have that choice to be able to say, I can go back or I can't, or I can choose to stay. And to be able to reflect on how those changes, whatever little changes she made, could change things in the past and in her current present. Yeah.
And even the knowledge that there would be things that might change that she wouldn't even know.
Exactly.
So people's and the thing that is so powerful about that is that in reading the story of Maria, where her choices just get more and more and more difficult, and the moral decisions that she has to make just escalate, which you do so gorgeously, is that it also lets us as readers think about how we're all so connected as human beings, that we're not alone.
Right. Yeah. And that was, that was very intentional. And that's why one of the reasons I brought some other characters in, to kind of show that, sometimes, even things we don't realize and people we meet that we don't even realize the connections that are going on around us. And we may never realize the connections that go around us. But how the choices.
If we did, it would be so overwhelming.
It would be completely overwhelming. It would be too overwhelming. I think it would be almost incapacitating to make any decisions, knowing that every decision you make, what the outcome is going to be. And that was kind of my idea with her patient at the beginning. The one who had come back and told her was, she referenced that, what if the outcome of a decision before you make it? Are you responsible for that, for the outcome then? Because it could be a bad outcome, right? All the little decisions that you make that you don't even know about.
Right. And I want all of you who are watching, as we're talking about She Wouldn't Change a Thing, to understand that this is a book about second chances and about possibilities. And what if you had the option to do your life over, to be someone else? Would you do that? And it's also it's very, if I can say this, and forgive me, it's a very spiritual book.
Yes, it is. It is. It's definitely. Yeah, I definitely tried to stay away from any, kind of specific religion. I don't think it's a very religious book.
Not at all.
It does reference, Christianity because some of the patients themselves were Christian. But I don't think that it doesn't really tie into one religion specifically. But it is a little bit spiritual because it is kind of, what happens, with her patient that had come back, and she said that she had died and come back. And so, what happens when you die? Do you come back? And is there reincarnation? And do some people not? There was just a lot of questions about, and I wanted it to be a reflective book. I wanted people to be able to read it and reflect on, what does happen? And if this, what will I see people after, after death? Will I come back? And will I,
Isn't that what makes a good story? Isn't that something that, talk about relatable on a grand scale? There's not one of us who hasn't thought about this. Right. Another thing I love about it, you have the rules for time travel. I have my list of things that I love about this book, is how you reference home and family, how that becomes the core of Maria's existence, in either life. And also in her decision-making process. What's home and going home, and what does family mean?
Yes. And so, and that was very important to me in the novel was, what does that mean? What's the definition of it? And I think that definition of home and family is different for so many people. We think about, in certain parts of the book when Maria is talking about her family and her children, and she's saying, I can't even think about them. I don't want to think about them being born to somebody else or being mothered by somebody else. And that sense of, what is your connection to the people around you, and kind of, what makes a family as well. And so that was kind of a very important central theme for me as well. That
how connected she is to both of hers, and knowing that what she does will affect what happens to them, or even if they never existed. What if they just never existed? It's bringing tears to my eyes to talk about this, because as an author, as a storyteller, I read this book and I think, oh my golly, how did she do that? It's complex, but it's not complicated. The reader is always grounded in where we are and what's going on. It's easy and fun and fast to read, but there's so much, underneath the tip of the iceberg. I want to read you what, this, but I want to read you all about Colleen Oakley, who
she's so sweet.
I know. Well, she says, Adlakha takes the classic what if tale and grounds it in a premise that is so outrageous, yet so solidly believable. I blew through it in 24 hours because I had to know what happened next. There's more to this book, and I'm going to read it. But I did too.
I appreciate that.
I thought, what is she going to do? And frankly, I thought, how is she going to do this? How is she going to pull this off and make the reader feel satisfied and grateful, satisfied and grateful at the end, as well as haunted, I have to say.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reference in your reviews to tearing up.
Yeah, it's I tried to write it so that there was more beneath the surface. I wanted to have a story that you could just read and be entertained by, if that was your main goal of reading the book. But I'm the kind of reader who really likes to delve into books and find hidden meanings within them. And so I really spent a lot of time trying to put some depth into the story so that it is a book that you could read more than once and pull things out of each time you read. And so I spent a lot of time really doing that, really adding layers to it. And I even went so far as to, one of the things I haven't really talked a lot about with the book is that almost every character in the book is named after somebody in history. And so it was kind of a nod to, do we have repeating lives? And could these people have been kind of, maybe reincarnations or rebirths of certain people throughout history? So each of the characters, there's a little nod to people throughout history that I felt like were kind of similar to them in some way.
Tell us a little bit more about that, little secrets that we can look for.
Okay, so at the beginning, the detective, Walt Andrews was actually the detective in the Jack the Ripper case in Scotland Yard. So the detective at the beginning of the book, his name was Walt Andrews. And let's see, Blaise, Maria's son, who's about to be born, was referenced after Blaise Pascal, who's a physicist, theoretical physicist. So a little bit about like the time travel kind of aspect. Yeah. So most of the characters in there have some kind of reference to somebody in history.
That is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. You Mysterious Galaxy listeners are hearing something brand new. And
yes, I haven't really discussed that much. I'm not really sure why. I just got, but I added a lot of that. I added a lot of layers and I added a lot of depth to it because I wanted it to be, like I said, I wanted people to be able to just read it through and be entertained and not have to look for hidden meanings in there. But then I also wanted readers who wanted to find something to be able to go and search and find some little things that were hidden in there.
And then once you find one, it's irresistible to keep looking. And also it lets us into your brain a little bit to let us know how you were thinking about what this character is and what this character means and why they're there. That is quite brilliant. One of the people who blurbed your book said something like, I'm looking for it right here, how much book clubs, it said book clubs meet your new best book. I know that that was me actually.
I was going to say, I think that was you.
I must have talked with book clubs because the idea of, and as the blurb says, ask yourself if you had it to do over, if you could have a second chance, would you do it? Now think again, are you sure?
Right. Yeah. And I love that. That was your blurb. And I really love that because I really think that is the essence of the book right there is, I think a lot of readers go into it and it's like, a time travel or redo your life book. I love those. Those are so much fun. And this one it's not one of those really fun do your life over books, right? It's, like you said, what would you do differently? And people are excited, like, oh, I think I do this. And then, like you said, well, think again. Because really, if you had your life to do over again, there's so many things that right, going into, having that awareness of what's going to happen. And, do I want to change this person's fate for the better? And if I do that, what am I going to change for somebody else? And what am I going to change for myself? And is it going to be negative? And is it, how is that going to impact everything? So it's a difficult situation. I think going back in time is, you know, is kind of scary. I mean, it sounds exciting. I think most people look at it as like how much fun that would be, and oh, I would do this and I would change this, but I think in reality it would be kind of frightening to know that you have the power, like, you know what's going to happen, and then you have the power to change people's fate.
I mean, I almost said, yes, it's a very realistic time travel book. Yeah. And I thought, oh, I wonder if that can be, but it certainly can be. I mean, how do you feel about all of the many people who have read this and the many people who will read this? I'll hold it up one more time in case you
Thank you.
Although my iPad is now going to give me trouble about it.
It's okay.
Here's the bottom half of the book, you all. What have your readers said about how their lives changed as a result of taking Maria's journey with her?
So yeah, I've had, a lot of, a lot of different reviews. It's very interesting. I love reading reviews from people who, get kind of personal about it, right? And so there have been people, and it's funny how, Maria has to make a decision. And so, there are going to be people who think that she made the right decision, and there are going to be people who think she made the wrong decision in the book. And so it's really interesting to me to read the reviews of people who think she made the wrong decision. And it's funny because it's, people are very headstrong and staunch in their decision. Like, she definitely should not have done, the book was okay, but I just think she made the wrong decision. Or, and so
it's so personal because they really,
personal.
It's like they're talking about a friend. My friend shouldn't have done that.
Yes, yes.
He won't tell.
And so, yeah, right. And so and then the other thing is, I've had some, personal friends who have read it, and they think, oh, well, as the author, this is what you would have done. And it's, well, I don't know. It's almost impossible to say. I mean, to put somebody in that situation and say, what would you have done? And so they just automatically assume, oh, you're the author, so this is what you would have done. Well, this is what Marie, the character, does.
That's why it's more fun to read it than to have to actually make a decision. Although I have to confess that as I was reading this book, I did picture you. I did picture you, the psychiatrist, and you, the mom. How did your family feel about that, and how do you feel about that?
Yes, and so this is a very personal book, and which is so funny because when I wrote this book, I had no intention of getting it published, and so I wrote it, kind of like if this had happened to me, right? And so it is a very personal book. So it was strange, and when I decided to get it published, I actually thought about going through and changing it a little bit because I felt it was very personal. I mean, obviously it's not me, it's never happened to me, but so I did think about changing it a little bit. And so I do have, my friends and family, when they read it, it's sometimes a little strange for them. They'll say, when my dad first read it, he said, oh, well, in this chapter, I thought you would do this, as referencing the main character as me. Yes. It's you. I'm like, it's not me. It's a character in my book. And so, so it was a little bit strange, but it's been nice. I just finished my edits on book 2, which is, completely not me. It has nothing, completely different from my life. So that made it a little nicer, but.
Well, I want to ask you about that in a minute, but let me just follow up a tiny bit about your writing, because you've been a psychiatrist and you've seen patients for years. And one of the things I think is so perfect about that is you have spent years listening to people and trying to understand their motivations. And that is such a valuable thing for a writer. But what was it that made you think, I could write fiction? What made you think that?
I don't even know. I have such a weird journey to writing and to publication. I was taking a break for a year from work. We had just moved, and my husband, my kids were young. they were just starting school, and I had, you know, not spent really any time at home with them. They'd been daycare because I was, you know, a full-time working mom.
Yeah.
And so my husband, we had just moved, and before I started practicing again, he said, why don't you just take a little time off before you go back to work, maybe spend some time with the kids and just kind of, you know, get back on track. And so my kids were in school. They were just starting school. And so I was sitting at home like, well, I might as well just go back to work. I'm, you know, just sitting here doing nothing. My kids are in school. And he said, just take a little bit of time and just, you know, before you start. And so I thought, I kept having this idea of, this thought kept coming back to me. Like, what if I woke up in my teenage self and I had to convince everybody that I had come back from the future? It was just some random thought that just kept popping into my head. And then I started thinking, you know, gosh, I can't imagine having to redo everything. You know, how exhausting that would be, right? And what would I do? And so this little seed just kind of, you know, planted in there. And then and I thought, well, I think I'm just going to write this. And I wrote this story, and I wrote it fast. I mean, just within a month or two. And it wasn't well written at all. I mean, it was just, I wasn't even a writer, you know, I just wrote it because it was I thought it was an interesting story, and I wasn't going to even show my husband, but I let him read it, and he said, oh, this is so good. You should get this published. And I was,
oh yeah.
Okay. How do I do that? You know, so it started from there. You know, that's kind of where I really didn't have any intention of writing a fiction book. I didn't know anything about writing within genres. I didn't know any of that. And so I was just really fortunate to get my agent, Stephanie Rostan is my agent. And so she was just fantastic. And so she like pretty much just held my hand and walked me through everything, helped me edit before we submitted it. And so, you know, it was a long process going through all of that, because
how long did it take?
I'd say, you know, we didn't submit it for years because in the meantime, I wasn't very invested in it. So I'd say the whole thing was probably like 6 or 7 years.
6 or 7 years.
Yeah, because I wasn't really invested in, you know, I was kind of like, okay, I'll work on that. I mean, and then there would be, you know, maybe months would go by, maybe even a year before I wouldn't write anything. I wouldn't edit at all. You know what I mean? And she would just, you know, whenever you're ready, you know, she wasn't pushing me to do it. It was just kind of one of those things where it was like, you know, when you're ready, when you want to do it, when you want to really focus on it, we can do it. And I just got so busy so that and then finally I got to the point where I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do this, let's just go ahead and do it and focus on it. And so then I really kind of dug in, and that was probably a couple of years where it was really like working hard of editing and sending it back and learning how to write. I mean, I didn't know how to write. I didn't know anything about plot arcs and character. I didn't know any of that. So
I wonder if that's good. You know, it's at some level, you know, you have this idea that you love,
yes.
And you have a story that you want to tell. And then it makes sense that you then learn how to tell it. Did Stephanie ever say to you what she saw in you?
No, you know, I still wonder that. So she's so great. I'm so fortunate. I just, you know, and I don't know. I think maybe it was just the idea. I think it was just such a different, unique idea. And so I think she kind of just liked that. And I'm not really sure why she stuck it out with me, what she saw in me, but I'm really grateful, very thankful that she did. But I think you're right. I think, you know, just having an idea and just writing what you love it just kind of shines through. It's difficult, you know, when we were talking about getting it published. I mean, nobody wants to buy a book from an unknown author that crosses multiple genres that, you know, that's different. And so that was a little bit difficult at first, was, you know, like, I think if I had been, you know, a well-known author, I could pull something like that off, and, you know, like, you know, this is a different, unique book that crosses multiple genres, and, you know, somebody would have been more willing. But I feel like I was fortunate too, to be able to get a publisher, and, you know, in that situation where I wasn't, you know, I had no name. And
well, a fantastic publisher.
I did. I know. I was so fortunate.
But the reason that I think this book works, and I know I'm battling my iPad again. The reason that I think this book works is that we, as I was saying, we love Maria. We love the main character. She is a person I'm moving the mouse on my laptop, and I'm not used to this. I'm trying to look at the questions that that the audience is asking at the same time that I'm talking to you. It's kind of a little jumbled, so forgive me for that. But I wonder if you, as a psychiatrist, with your psychiatrist brain, allowing yourself to blossom, allowing your imagination to blossom, and learning a new craft in a different way, has made you look at psychiatry differently, has made you look at the world differently?
Yeah, I definitely think it has. You know, I feel like I'm a little more open now. I mean, I really enjoy, and what I enjoy reading, I feel like has evolved a little bit since I've started writing.
There is a question about what you're reading now. How and I love the evolution of that. The evolution of reading is fascinating.
Yeah. So, I find that, you know, books that that deal more with kind of the spirituality and a little bit. I've never was one to read speculative fiction or science fiction before I wrote this, and so. Like not at all. I mean, I didn't read magical realism. I didn't read any of that before I wrote this. So it was very strange. And so when I first,
strange because how did you, circling back to Sarah's rules for time travel, you know, which I embrace. And I think you should write a nonfiction book about it so we can know. The idea that you allowed your mind to go that direction must have been kind of surprising to you.
Yeah, it was, and very enjoyable. You know, I feel like, and knowing what goes into crafting a novel. I mean, it's so much. You know, it's so much. But really appreciating that. And so when I read a novel that has a lot of depth to it, or you know, elements that I think are kind of unique. I really appreciate that. And, you know, being able to, and knowing now, you know, like a plot driven versus a character driven novel, and being able to see one that has both. I really appreciate novels that have both, you know, really, really complex and developed characters, but at the same time, a plot that's exciting and moves you along.
Reading as an author, reading as a writer is a very different thing, for better or for worse.
Yeah. And so sometimes I'm not so sure, because now I feel like sometimes I get lost in prose, right? I'm like, oh, I really like that. Oh, I really like how that, you know, but then at the same time, and then I'm, you know, looking at the technicalities of writing. And so sometimes that can take away from the story. So,
and you were talking about working on your new book, which is incredibly exciting. What have you learned from being a debut author after those years of working on this book? What have you taken from the craft or even the mindset of writing to work on your new book?
So what I realized was, you know, I'm in the camp of the plotters. You know, the plotters and the what do they call it, pantsers and plotters. So I think for the first book, I'm so undisciplined unless I have something completely plotted out. I mean, I enjoy writing, but I am a very kind of scientific and like in the box, you know, as far as organized kind of person. And so I'm very much a rule follower. I like deadlines. I want everything to be, you know, tell me when this needs to be done and I will have it done. And so I have found with the first book, I mean, when I wrote it, obviously I was just randomly writing. I didn't even know where it was going when I wrote it. And so it took so long to get there because I didn't know. And so what I found with my second book was I plotted it out completely before I even wrote the first word. I mean, I did research for months and months on the topic that I wrote on, and I completely plotted it out. Not only did I write, you know, a synopsis, I plotted out each chapter. I mean, I did chapter summary before I even wrote one word. And then within each chapter, I wrote an outline for each chapter. So I found that it was much more effective for me. I mean, it saved so much time. And I think that's personal, you know, I mean, I don't think that's advice that, you know, everybody should take, because it doesn't work that way for all people. I mean, some people do their best writing when they're given the freedom to be, you know, imaginative within each chapter. But I found for myself that if I, you know, working on a deadline, because I had a deadline, it was a 2-book deal that I signed with Forge. And so I was working on a deadline. And so I was much more efficient and effective when I was working on a deadline, I found. And then also by outlining everything and plotting everything.
That was one of the questions we have also is what advice would you give for an aspiring author? And I think that's really wise, because I think new authors, people who are writing initially, want some secret. You know, they want the rule of how to do it so that it'll work. And I can tell you that when you're talking about these extensive outlines, I'm thinking, I could not do that in a million years.
And I think most authors aren't like that. I mean, I don't know if it's just something from my science background. I don't know if that's what it is. But I have found most authors, you know, when I talk to them about that, it's like they can't even imagine doing it. Like they feel like it takes away all their creative and expressive freedom to do it that way.
Well, some do. I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen in my novels before. and I know our shared editor has said to me, could you just send me an outline? And I say, how do I know what's going to happen until it really happens? And it doesn't really happen until I write it. But, you know, Ken Follett and Jeffrey Deaver, they make huge 60-page outlines.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yes, they do. So you're in a club of wonderful, successful. It's just 2 different ways that our brains work. And that's fascinating, isn't it?
Yes. And I think that's fantastic. That's when people, you know, I don't think that there is any secret to writing. I mean, I think the secret lies within yourself. I mean, you have to figure out what makes it work for you. I mean, I think just forcing yourself to write is step one, right? I mean, that's always the most difficult part, not getting distracted. And with everything else, especially social media and everything else that's going on, it's really kind of forcing yourself. I mean, one way that I have found, and this might be good advice, this might be helpful for people, but what I have found works is I have on my phone, I have a timer. And so if I'm really, you know, on a deadline, I'll say, okay, I get 45 minutes and I cannot open anything online. I cannot get on the internet. I just have to type. All I can look at on my computer is my documents for 45 minutes straight. I can't check my phone, nothing else. And when the timer goes off, I give myself 10 minutes to do whatever I want to do. Yeah. And so and again, that might just be my brain, the way my brain works. But I have that, when I do that 45 minutes goes pretty fast.
I want to tell you that I do 34 minutes.
34?
I set the time up for 34 minutes because I thought 45 minutes was too long and I would never do that. And 30 minutes seemed like it was too short and I wouldn't get anything done. And I do love that advice because, and I think it has to do with focusing your brain, that once you make a deal with yourself to focus, you know, those 34 minutes, I'll say, start over, and do it again and again and again, because you've made this window of focus for yourself.
Yeah, I do 30 minutes sometimes, but you know, if I'm not on a deadline or if I'm really distracted one day, I'll be okay, just 30 minutes. And then you'll have 10 minutes to do whatever you want to do. so I do 30 sometimes.
Yeah,
I know, right?
I was just reading an article about Agatha Christie and how she felt about writing. And she was saying that one of the things she accepted and embraced when she took on the profession of being an author, not just somebody who was churning out little stories, but a professional author. And she said that exactly as you said, Sarah, that the first thing is just that you have to write, even on the days that you don't feel like it, and even on the days when you think your book isn't good.
Yes.
And that's a big step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's something else, you know, it's, there are a lot of highs and lows with being an author, you know, that I didn't expect. And they're high highs and they're low lows. And so, you know, some days I think I've written the most brilliant thing in the world. And then some days I think this is the worst book that's ever been written. I mean, and I'm just not even worthy. It's not even worthy of being published. And so yeah, so they're, you know, dealing with that and then being able to write while you're dealing with that. Or, you know, you get, you know, especially as a debut author, you know, those reviews sometimes can be, they're pretty brutal. And so they can, you know, a lot of times, I try not to read them, especially on Goodreads, because those can be kind of brutal. But you know, every once in a while, I'll kind of click through and see, like, oh, what do people think about it, and it can really get you down. And so I found that I just do so much better when I just stay away from looking at any reviews. But at the same time, I find them helpful. I mean, sometimes I find them helpful if I feel like, you know, a lot of people are kind of saying the same thing. It's like, well, maybe there's a point there. You know, maybe there is something that I'm missing.
I'm just soaking up what you're saying, because I'm thinking, you know, after 13 books, I'm thinking, welcome to writer world, Sarah.
Right. I know.
I've got to tell you, this is what it's like, and we're all in this together. All of you who are listening tonight, who are writing, I'm sure you're all applauding and saying, yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, but this is a triumph. She wouldn't change a thing. It's a wonderful, unique, immersive novel. Did you know? So you knew? So when you wrote this, you didn't have an outline for this. Did you know the end?
I did. Yes. I mean, I kind of just had the idea, you know, of what if this, and then this happened, and, you know, she had to do this. You know, it was kind of just the basic premise of this happens, and then she does this. And so I knew what was going to happen. I just didn't really know how she was going to get there. And so it took a lot of editing to get her there. So.
Well, I'm sure, but see, isn't that the fun part? When you realize the book you meant to write, when you take away what doesn't belong, and the book emerges. Speaking of emerging, as we're running out of time a little bit here, but tell us about what you're working on now. I hate to take away from your fabulous debut novel, but everybody who's read this already, and I'm hoping that is everybody in this place, there are signed book plates at Mysterious Galaxy for Sarah's book. So make sure that you get your book there with the signed book plate. What are you working on now?
So I just finished edits of a book called Midnight on the Marne. And it is, it's kind of a companion novel to this one. It's one of the characters in this book, George. He's a 94-year-old man who comes to visit Maria in the hospital, who has been through the same thing she has. And it's his story. So it's a historical fiction novel set during World War I. And it's about an American soldier, George, who meets a French nurse, Marcella, who's also a spy. And it's their journey. And it's an alternate history historical fiction. So in this story, the German army is able to defeat the Allies at the Second Battle of the Marne, which was in real history was the last German offensive of the war. But in this story, they actually break through the defensive line and win the war. And so George and Marcella are kind of on the run in France, in occupied France, and it's kind of their story. And it's George's story of kind of coming back and having to make his own decisions.
You are a brave woman, Sarah. You are a brave woman to take on something that people know what happened and say, I mean, you're the queen of what if, and say, what if this didn't really happen? What if it didn't happen though?
Yeah. So I'm really excited about it. We just had the cover reveal last week. So I just finished my last edits, finally finished those. And so we're going. It's going to be released next August. So pretty excited.
I cannot wait to read that. You send that.
Thank you. I will.
And all of you, and tell us the title of it one more time.
Midnight on the Marne.
And Midnight on the Marne. Wonderful. Yes. I can't wait to read it. And finally, let me ask you, let me just check the questions here and see if we've answered a lot of them already because I was looking at them. This is interesting. What books have stuck with you over the years? I know you said your reading habits have changed. Were there books that influenced you that you think about still?
Yes. You know, what's funny is the TV show Lost, for some reason, really stuck with me. I know it got, kind of mixed reviews, mixed ratings. But for some reason, that show always kind of stuck with me, that kind of like what if, um,
And a sort of remaking of a civilization. And the structure and the hierarchy and the motivation and how good and bad battle throughout.
Yeah, that one. One of my favorite books that I have read multiple times that I just love was The Dove Keepers by Alice Hoffman. And that has a little bit of magical elements, some magical elements in it. I like Alice Hoffman books. I feel like she adds a little bit of some of those magical elements into her stories, but they tend to be based in actual history. So those are interesting. I'm a big historical fiction buff as well. So a lot of the books that I've really enjoyed are some of the historical fiction books, like Anthony Doerr's All the Light We Cannot See. Of course, that was a beautiful book. I also like Paulo Coelho. Yeah.
So you're literary, poetic, thoughtful.
Yes. Yeah.
And how did a person with that kind of brain become a psychiatrist?
I'm not really even sure. When I went to medical school, I had just assumed I would do emergency medicine because I worked as a paramedic for many years before I went to medical school. And so I just kind of last minute decided it was just so fascinating to me. I think I always had that, a little bit of a imaginative little spark, kind of artistic spark in me somewhere, maybe hidden somewhere that I just didn't know. And so
you have to be a good.
Yeah. And it was kind of, I felt like it was kind of one of the last frontiers of medicine, the unknown. The brain is, not that we know everything, obviously, about medicine and all the body parts, but the brain is kind of one of the last, really, the last frontier of medicine is what I like to call it, because there's so much that isn't known, especially in psychiatry, what medical conditions that were once just thought to be, just personality disorders or things like that are really complex medical issues. So I think it was kind of the unknown of it that drew me.
And I see this makes so much sense. This is no longer a conundrum. This is you exploring places that are unknown. And that's exactly what you do. And she wouldn't change a thing. What if someone came to a psychiatrist and said they were a time traveler from the future, and she found out she might be perhaps the same thing? What if that? And it's a marvelous premise. I want you, if you ever get a chance, to read Winter's Tale by Mark Helprin. Do you know that book? Winter's Tale?
No, I don't.
It is lovely. It's in New York City in 1899 and in 1999, something like that, or maybe it's 1799 and 1899.
Yeah.
Out there will know. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's again about time travel, about love and family, and what if and what we all mean to each other. It's beautiful. Winter's Tale by Mark Helprin. I really bet that you would love it. There it is. Look,
perfect.
Not only has Mysterious Galaxy put up the pre-order already for Midnight on the Marne, and you all must click on it before this show is over. All the books that we have mentioned are also in the chat. My final question is a question from the audience, and that is, they wanted to know the most surprising thing about being a debut author. But let me ask you, what's the best thing? What do you just, pull the duvet up to your chin at night and think, oh, I am so lucky?
It's going to sound silly, but just to be published, honestly. I think that was one of the most surprising things as well. Going into publishing and having no background and knowing nothing about it, I didn't realize how difficult it was and what a struggle and what a journey it was going to be. So just to be a published author is, to me, just a huge, achievement. And so I think that's kind of, sometimes I'm still kind of shocked that, like, you can actually just Google, my book, and it's out there. It just seems
you can
so
go
surreal.
into Mysterious Galaxy, and there it is.
Yeah, or like, I had to run to Target today to pick up some stuff. I'm out of town, right? And so of course I forgot stuff from home. So I ran into Target and I thought, well, I'm just gonna go check and see if my book's here. And there it was. Oh. So it was fun. It's just little things like that where you could go, like you said, I mean, I can go into like Mysterious Galaxy. I can go into, a bookshop and I can see my book on the shelf, and it's just such a surreal thing to me. And so I'm just very grateful. I feel so fortunate to be in this situation and to have had this opportunity. So I think for me, I'm still kind of just in that realm of, I try not to look at, oh gosh, the things that people stress about when you've released a book, and what are the reviews, and what are the sales, and what is this, and just to be just grateful that I'm here, that I made it this far. And so,
I mean, your husband said to you, you should get this published.
I know, and it was such a funny. Okay.
and now here it is, and here is the book you dreamed of. Yes. And now this dream has come true. And I have to tell you that that never will go away. That reality and that joy, that will stay with you. And that is one of the things that I treasure about this as well. Sarah, congratulations.
Oh, thank you
for your generous, wonderful answers. Kellyanne is back to close the show, but I hope you had fun talking about this. It's a treasure of a book. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much, Hank. And thank you so much for being here with me. And Kellyanne, thanks so much for hosting in Mysterious Galaxy.
Sure. We're so excited. Thank you so much for joining us and for being such a good sport about getting started a little bit late. And thank you, Hank, for sticking with it. We're great. And it was such a pleasure to host both of you. And thank you much to our audience for joining virtually. We really hope that, with everything COVID related, hopefully wrapping up, we're so glad that you're able to go out to a real bookstore, book out there in the world, which is, COVID's for debut author. So, congratulations. And congrats on all your hard work. And for everyone watching, if you haven't already, you can purchase that by clicking that green Buy Books with Signed Book Plates button. You get a signed book plate with your book from Sarah. With that, I'm going to all off, and thanks for joining. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.